It's no secret that Jujutsu Kaisen references Buddhism. There are so many hidden references woven in the story, from hand seals to character symbolism and the way the plot unravels. I'm here to explain the JJK Buddhism iceberg. Heck, the iconic line, "Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one," is a quote from Buddha himself. Just how deep is this iceberg? Let's start with the first layer, the things that we can see. The Hand Mudras, basically the hand seals sorcerers use, are all closely related to Buddhism. The term mudra literally means a human practicing to be a Buddha. This is Gojo's hand seal when he does his unlimited void. Now, a lot of people think this is associated with Te Shakatan. Originally, the Indian god Indra said to be the strongest god. Now, this all makes sense for Gojo, right? But looking closer, the mudra actually differs slightly to Gojo's hand seal, which many have overlooked. It uses the left hand while Gojo uses his right hand. The index finger is hooked to the middle finger, but the positions of the fingers are swapped for Gojo. This changes the mudra completely. Gojo's hand seal is actually the mudra of Marisi, a Buddhist goddess who is the personification of light, referred to as the goddess of dawn, symbolizing spiritual enlightenment. Like, seriously, Gojo's first name is Satoru, which literally means to be enlightened. Enough said. She's also referred to as a bodhisattva, vowing to bring all sentient beings to awakening. You mean his students? She represents awakening, triumph over evil, and victory in the face of extreme hardship. You mean he's coming back even after being dead? Anyways, I'd say this is much more fitting. Next is Sukuna. His malevolent shrine seal is associated with Enma or Yama, known as the King of Hell. Plus, Yama was originally human just like Sukuna. Also worth noting that Marisi is often addressed as the Queen of Heaven, which is the opposite to Yama. Just like how Sukuna and Gojo were always pitted against each other as the ultimate good and evil. Next, Jogo's domain expansion. His hand seal is from Daikukuten, who is one of the 7 lucky gods in Japan. But this god was actually originated from Shiva in Hinduism, who is the destroyer of all things. And we know Jogo is a volcano that literally destroys stuff. Now, I'd like to think after reincarnating, Jogo gets to become one of the lucky gods. Then there's Megumi's petting zoo. His hand seal is associated with Yakushi Nyari, known for his 12 vows to attain enlightenment. He aspired to erase the sufferings of sentient beings. This is just like Megumi's character. The 12 heavenly generals are his followers. One of them is literally called Mahoraga, who we all know is Megumi's 10th Shikigami. This is only the top layer. Let's go to the next layer down. The exact Buddhist inspirations for the major JJK characters, starting from Gojo. He's inspired by this guy. Fudo literally means the immovable or the unshakable one, and he's one of the 5 bright kings in Japanese Buddhism. And the story here is that Fudo converts anger into salvation, and he uses his power to educate others against ignorance. This is similar to Gojo's character as he was raising a new generation of sorcerers to get rid of the old Jujutsu system. Speaking of new generation, what do you think of Yuji and Megumi? As it turns out, Fudo was frequently depicted with 2 of his 8 young attendants. One is Saitaka, who personified expedient action. The definition of expedient is helpful or useful in a particular situation, but sometimes not morally acceptable. Bro, this literally is Yuji's character. While the other Kangara personified obedience, which represents Megumi. On the other hand, there's a deity called Iraten, also known as the god of kitchen, which is interesting because malevolent shrines, Japanese reading can also be translated as malevolent kitchen. Reminds me of Dungeon Meshi, although Sukuna may not be based on him, but his father instead, Ishana, who represents the power to influence and seduce humans before consuming them. As for Toji, it's Bishamon, the god of treasure, wealth, and warriors. How so? This is relevant to the idea that Tengen is based on the Buddha. And remember who was supposed to merge with Tengen? It was Rika. Well, as the mythology goes, Bishamon guards and gives away not just Buddha's teachings, but also the relics of Buddha's cremated body, which in this case is Riko's corpse. However, what ultimately gives it away is how he strikes the same pose as Bishamon during his second round with Gojo. Now finally we have Tengen and Kenjaku. Tengen is based on Buddha himself. Sort of goes without saying considering how she literally shed herself and completely detached from material reality and shape. She's a pudding, but she's enlightened, I guess. Plus, it's also canon that Tengen was the one who spread Buddhism in Japan. As for Kenjaku, it's Devadatta, apparently the greatest enemy of Buddha, based on him in the sense that he fails to reach enlightenment and also because he remains attached to the material world. In simpler words, Tengen evolved, while Kenjaku remained attached to his physical self till the end. Now let's advance to the next layer, which is the theme of enlightenment and how Gege uses his characters to set it all up. Say Sukuna and Gojo, it's quite obvious that they're the enlightened ones, aka the woke bros. Gojo and Sukuna are always portrayed in a similar light. The same quote we heard from Gojo was also used to describe Sukuna in the manga. Let's first consider the definition of what it means to be the enlightened one according to Buddhism. Basically, do bad, your next life will be bad. Do less bad, your next life will be less bad. One day you will be woke enough to break the cycle and stop being reborn to relive the human experience of pain and loss. If you're like, oh man, so how can I stop being reborn? Stop return mailing me back to this place. Simple, just listen to Nirvana on loop. Okay, no. Stop wanting things. Understand that holding on to things that are impermanent will stir up your emotions when you inevitably lose them. When you're free from desiring temporary happiness, you achieve nirvana. Say no to that snack. So you see, being woke in Buddhism is when you are free from the cycle of rebirth. It's when you are no longer bound by anything. You have to be free. This is why when Gojo calls himself the Honored One, he also admits that he's not even angry about Riko's death. This is also why Sukuna tells Jogo that if he wants to reach the same heights as Gojo, he should give up everything. Yes, this idea of freeing yourself is true enlightenment. But if that's the case, where do you think it puts Geto? He's basically a priest considering how he takes over a religious site. However, and this is where it gets interesting, Geto's character arc is meant to describe not the path to enlightenment, but the deviation of the path. His character arc is to show what it means to stray from the Buddhist teachings. Here in this cover where he's doing the Buddhist pose, if you look at his hands, you'll notice that they are reversed. This is a metaphorical presentation of the same idea, symbolizing he not only strays away from the path, but runs the complete opposite way. Now, another character that we gotta talk about is Mahito. Remember his domain expansion? It was called the self-embodiment of perfection. It's a direct contrast to how his existence embodies the ugliness, prejudices, and the violence of humanity. He mirrors people's hatred. Most importantly, Mahito literally translates to true person. He symbolizes the human experience, why we are trying to break from the cycle according to Buddhism, to not be reborn as a curse in this literal sense. Alright, at the last layer we have the 4 noble truths in Buddhism, and how they are the crux of Jujutsu Kaisen's storytelling. Once you notice it, you can no longer ignore it. The 4 noble truths are Daka, Samudaya, Nirodha, and Magga. Daka is about how life is filled with various forms of suffering, like physical pain or emotional turmoil. Samudaya is that there is reason for our suffering, and it is often rooted in our desires. Nirodha tells you that by letting go of desires and attachments, you can attain a state of liberation. And finally, Magga, known as the Eightfold Path. It is the path made up of a set of guidelines which one can use to detach themselves from suffering. By the way, it's pretty clear that the 8-handled wheel above Mahuraga's head symbolizes this exact Eightfold Path in Buddhism. In summary, the 4 noble truths are suffering, the cause of suffering, the idea that there can be an end to the suffering, and then there's the path to the end of suffering. So how is it relevant in JJK? From Gojo's revival and hidden inventory to Sukuna's character, Toji's dominance, Geto's downfall, Todo's supremacy, Mahito's evolution, and even Yuji's constant losing streak. If a Jujutsu Kaisen character is constantly on the ground, you bet that character simply hasn't identified their path to end their suffering. This is exactly what made Sukuna and Toji so different from everyone else. This is why it wasn't until Gojo also took the path that he became the same as them. This is how Maki was able to mercilessly slaughter her clan. And guys, this is also why Yuji always gets the wrong end of the stick. He is the exact opposite of Sukuna, and that's why his suffering not only persists, it rages. I think this is also why Gege writes the way he does. There's no protagonist halo or plot armor. Your favorite character can be removed at a second's notice. It's life. Don't get attached. Get enlightened.